Okay, thank you. Well, well done to you all for making it this far. So my name is Andrew Gilbert, and I'm a staff scientist at Q-Chem. And I've had a long association with Q-Chem going back a couple of decades now, but I've only joined the staff there in 2017. And I'm primarily responsible for the IQMol viewer that you've been using for some of the exercises during this workshop. So all complaints and criticism should be directed towards me. But I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about some of the new features that QChem 6 has. And these are features that I'm not responsible for. Really, I'm just sort of flagging your attention to what sort of new functionality QChem has available in its latest release. So I'm not claiming to be an expert on any of these topics, but hopefully there'll be something in here that's of interest to you all. Just to say that QChem, or the QChem 5 paper was recently published, and I think that had about 150 authors on it. And so QChem is really a large package with a large developer base. I think we have about 200 active developers, and they're all contributing to various extents to our code. So this is really a team effort. And I'm just, as I say, just sort of advertising some of the features that have gone in recently. Okay, well, as of, I think about QChem 5, QChem shifted over to a time-based release schedule. Prior to that, it was more of a feature-based release schedule, so we would wait until certain features were implemented and then put out a release. But that often meant that there was quite a long time between drinks. And so as of 5.0, which I think was released in 2017, about 5 years ago, we've moved to this time-based release with a new generational release, so 5 to 6, about every 5 years. And so 6.0 is our new generation, and we're advertising that with the tagline at the dawn of the next generation. So 6.0 was released last year on July the 3rd. That was followed up very quickly by 6.01. Sorry, 6.0.1 and 6.0.2, which released in August and December last year as well. So the pattern of the releases is, as I say, once every 5 years or so, we have a generational release. And then once every year, we have a major release. And so this year, 6.1 will be our major release. In addition to the major release, each year we have 2 maintenance releases or minor releases. And last year they were 6.0.1 and 6.0.2. So it's very active in terms of the release schedule. And this is great for people who are putting new features into the code, because it's a relatively short turnaround time before those features become available to the public. So 6.1 is planned for release, as I say, this year in May the 1st. Hopefully that won't slip too much. So you can look forward to that. And just to point out that QChem has a QChem maintenance program, QMP. And if you subscribe to that, then the releases, you get those as soon as the upgrade, sorry, you get as soon as they're released. And that's all part of the maintenance plan. Okay, so unfortunately I missed Martin's talk. It was at 4 a.m. this morning for me, so sorry, Martin. So some of this may be a little bit of a repeat of what he said, but for those of you that missed it, such as myself, just a little bit of background in terms of QChem's density functional capabilities. So I think QChem has the largest range of density functionals available in any quantum chemistry package. And this includes over 30 exchange functionals, 30 correlation functionals, and 150 exchange correlation functionals, where the exchange and correlation are combined together. So that's really should satisfy anybody there. And those functionals span the full range of Purdue's Jacob's ladder of functionals. So everything from GGAs, meta-GGAs, hybrids, which are very popular, all the way up to the fifth rung double hybrids, which include parts of MP2 theory to improve on the accuracy there. So we've got the whole ladder covered there. But one thing missing from most of the functionals is the modeling of non-covalent interactions, but QChem's got those covered as well. So it's got I think the full range of Stefan Grinner's DFT-D methods. So these are empirical potentials that add on dispersion to your density functional and can be mixed in with any of the 150 odd functionals that you have available to you. And also we have non-local correlation functionals, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. So I think Martin did show this image, so apologies for that, but just to remind you that if we break up all the myriad of functionals into their various rungs on Jacob's ladder, you can see that each rung is in general better than the previous one. So rung 5 is better than rung 4 better than rung 3, and so forth. But in particular, the best performing functionals in each of the rungs are systematically better. And one thing to note about these, the best functionals in each of the rungs is that they all contain these non-local correlation components. And indeed, all of the best performing functionals from rungs 3 to 5 were all developed in Berkeley in Martin Head-Gordon's group, and these are all available within QChem. Okay, so these non-local correlation functionals are very useful for treating non-covalent interactions. But the problem with them is that they require double quadrature. And so here you can see sort of the ansatz for the non-local correlation functionals. They have this kernel represented here by F, which is non-local. It depends on two positions, R and R prime. And then that is integrated with the regular 1 electron density rho. And that's a double quadrature. It's over both R and R prime, which are both three-dimensional spaces. So this is quite an expensive component, but it does, as you saw in the previous slide, lead to much greater accuracy. So these contributions, these non-local contributions are, as I say, as indicated, they're computed via this double integral, and that double integral has to be computed numerically. And so you have, in effect, a double quadrature grid that's being invoked there. So the new thing in QChem 6, this is the non-local correlation functionals have been implemented prior to 6, but the new thing in QChem 6 is that we now have analytic frequencies for the VV10 functional, which is the non-local part of the best performing functionals that you saw on the previous slide, things like omega B97 M-V, B97 M-V, and omega B97X-V. So those best performing functionals we can now do analytic frequencies for. This has led to significant speedups over the finite difference methods that were being used previously. And what's more, it has been officially parallelized. So we're seeing 80% efficiency out to 32 cores, which makes us applicable to quite large systems. And just to point out, the QChem 6 is actually the only code out there that can compute these analytic non-local frequencies. So that's a unique feature of QChem and is in QChem 6 as the first. Okay, the next feature I'd like to draw your attention to is a shift towards interoperability. So this is some work done by Eric Berquist, who's another staff scientist at Q-Chem. And QChem 6 can produce a HDF5 formatted archive file. And this is heavily structured based on a JSON-like schema. And the advantage of having a structured file format like that is that it facilitates the interfacing to external packages and tools that researchers may be developing. So without this sort of file format, the developers sort of force, or the developer of the external package is forced to rely on things like the formatted checkpoint file, or the output files, or dumping data to binary files, which is not very satisfactory. So this is a sort of a first step in what will be quite a long journey, but QChem 6 can now produce the HDF5 archive file, and this has been integrated with IQMol. So IQMol can interface, should I say, with IQMol. So IQMol can access the data within the file. And the plans for the not too distant future will be to make other APIs available. So currently it's just the C++ API, which is the one that IQMol is using. But along with a Python API, this will allow other researchers to script whatever is their ideas and access the data within the archive file relatively straightforward, and without having to write their own parsers and things like that for the text files. Okay. Okay, something else that's new in 6.0 is the nuclear electronic orbitals. So this theory goes beyond treating just the electrons as quantum particles, and also treats some of the nuclei as quantum particles. So typically when we run a quantum chemistry calculation, we invoke the Born-Oppenheimer approximation. We will freeze the nuclei and then solve for the electronic wave function for that particular structure. And what NEO does is it relaxes that, so it goes beyond the Born-Oppenheimer approximation and allows typically just the hydrogens, because they're the lightest nuclei, to behave in a quantum fashion. And the advantage of doing this is that it directly incorporates the quantum effects from the nuclei. And this is useful for accounting for things like zero-point energies. If you're looking at tunneling reactions, it also incorporates the effects of anharmonicity for the hydrogens, or for the particles that you're treating quantum mechanically, and can also model proton delocalization. Okay, so NEO was first introduced in a preliminary way back in QChem 5.2 and has been actively developed since to extend the range of theories for which it could be used. And that first work was implemented by Fabian Wojtowicz and Sharon Hemi-Schiffer. And in QChem 6, there's some new contributions from Gentau and Patrick Schneider. And this, as I say, extends the levels of theory that can be used for the calculations. So in particular, it's been extended to the couple cluster singles doubles method. And also analytic gradients and Hessians have been implemented within the time-dependent DFT framework. When this allows things like Fibronic excitations to be analyzed. Okay, there are more details if you're interested on the NEO method. More details can be found in webinar 41, which is linked directly on these slides, which will be made available, or you can just go straight to the Q-Chem webpage to access these webinars. Okay, Q-Chem has been around for quite a few years now. I think we're approaching 30 years. And one of the first bits of code that went in was John Baker's optimized package. This was written in Fortran, and was not particularly easy to maintain, and so has remained part of Q-Chem ever since. But just recently, Peter McLaughlin from Q-Chem, he's been implementing a new optimizer package called libopt3 to finally replace John Baker's code and bring Q-Chem's optimizer into the 21st century. Okay, so again, this is work that's ongoing, and so there's still some functionality that needs to be put into libopt3. And while that's going on, both optimizers are available, and you can select between the two. But the new libopt3 has a range of different coordinates that you can select for the optimization, including Cartesian, redundant internal, and delocalized natural internals, which are usually more efficient than the Cartesian versions. There's also a range of algorithms that are being implemented, both gradient and Hessian based. So steepest descent, conjugate gradient, and quasi-Newton. There's several of those, BFGS, and the symmetric rank 1 methods are all available there. Importantly, we now have exact Newton, which is useful if there are if you have a particularly problematic optimization problem. One of the features that Peter has put into libopt3 is the ability to recompute the Hessian for quasi-Newton. So during a quasi-Newton step, you're making an update to the Hessian, so you're only ever carrying around an approximate Hessian. But if you allow the ability to recompute the exact Hessian, then that can just correct the Hessians that's being used for the subsequent steps and make that more reliable. So libopt3 is the default optimizer in Q-Chem 6 for unconstrained optimization. As I said, this is an ongoing work, and Peter's currently putting in the ability to handle constraints in the optimizer at the moment. In terms of performance, Peter's been pretty thorough with testing his new code. So these are results that I think are, excuse me, garnered from several thousand optimization jobs, and doing a comparison with the new code, between new code and the old optimized package. And there's actually quite a lot of information here, but just the take-home messages are that for Cartesian, libopt3 is always faster, usually by about 10%. And if you allow a read in an exact Hessian to start the geometry optimization, libopt3 also wins, and there the gains are more significant, typically 30 to 40% faster than the old optimized package, and that's in delocalized coordinates. If there's only an approximate Hessian, then it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but optimize is sometimes a little bit faster using the delocalized coordinates using the approximate initial Hessian. Okay, so we all know that chemistry doesn't always occur in a vacuum. So it's often important to model the environment of a molecular system, and Q-Chem has a suite of different approaches for modeling the environment. So typically, the environment is much larger than the system of interest. And so we can't just include it explicitly, and we need to sort of partition our system into a subcomponent of interest, and then the rest, which is usually treated at a much lower level of theory, approximated. So John Herbert gave a very good talk on implicit solvent models, if you're interested in doing chemistry in solution. We also have a range of QM/MM methods within QChem, both explicitly. So we've got standalone code within QChem that can do QM/MM, and we also have interfaces to the CHARM, GROMACS, and AMBER packages for doing the molecular mechanics part of the calculation. In addition to that, we also have QM EFP, which is effective fragment potentials. So these are sort of multipole expansions of sort of explicit system parts of the environment. And these have received some updates in Q-Chem 6 and improvements. So the PCM printout, for example, has been improved in Q-Chem 6. And the QM/MM interface has been improved a little bit too, with the ability to read in the molecular orbitals from the previous step, which just improves the convergence in subsequent steps. So these are all ongoing improvements. Another family of methods for modeling the environment, QM embedding methods. So we have frozen density embedding and projection-based embedding, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about on the next slide. So with density embedding, again, same idea. We're breaking up the system into a part of interest. Here it's labeled A, so it's a relatively small part where the reaction may be occurring. And then the remainder, which is labeled B, which is the environment. So the idea behind density embedding is that these two parts are modeled with different levels of theory. And if you are careful with making sure that the orbitals are mutually orthogonal between the two subcomponents, A and B, then you can get an energy expression for the total system, which is calculated by computing a high level of theory on the small fragment of interest, A, and then adding the energy using a lower level of theory on the combined system, A and B, and then subtracting out the low level energy of A to avoid any double counting there. Okay, so in the past, Q-Chem 5 has had both DFT and DFT and wave function theory and DFT embedding methods available. But Q-Chem 6 has extended the density embedding methods to equations of motion coupled cluster methods, and also can now handle complex basis functions. And that can be useful for looking at metastable states. So if you've got autoionizing states like transient anions, highly excited electronic states, and core ionized species, these are all require complex absorbing potentials and can be now modeled with the density embedding schemes. Okay, there's lots of other contributions which I won't go into quite so many details on in 6.0. So we have couple cluster optical rotation in there. That's work done by Josephine Anderson and Kaushik Nanda. Equations of motion oscillator strength in both velocity and mixed gauges. More work by Josephine and Sonia Coriani. We have complex valued CC2, RICC2, and RICCSD. This is work by Kansu Utku, Garrett Perrin, and Thomas Jaeger. And Ludia Slupchenko has put in pairwise fragment excitation EDA for QM EFP calculations. And if you want more details on any of these methods, I encourage you to visit the Q-Chem website, where you can find both the manual and white papers explaining some of these in more detail. Okay, so release is not just about new features, it's also about improvements, and Q-Chem is constantly being improved by the various developers. So just to give you an idea of what sort of improvements are being implemented. Our RI code has been sped up and made more stable. So this is for density fitting for Coulomb exchange and MP2, RI MP2. The ADICE SCF algorithm has had improvements to improve the convergence there. We've added additional basis sets, we've added additional density functionals, and also increased the range of things like the angular momentum for the basis sets for XAPT calculations. So lots going on there. Okay, so that's some of the features that were available in 6.0, and thought I'd just give you a sneak peek of a couple of features which will be released in the upcoming 6.1 release, which is due to be released in May. So there's been a new Fibronic decomposition analysis put in, and so this is code which I guess the Fibronic spectral code was previously available, so that's the what's shown in gray there, the curve in gray. Q-Chem would print out a spectrum with the Fibronic coupling in there. Q-Chem 6.1 has the ability to break that spectrum down into the contributions from each of the normal modes. And so you can see that's illustrated there in the various colored spectra below the gray one. And this can be useful for trying to determine which vibrational modes are leading to the various peaks in the Fibronic spectrum. And so in this example here, you can see that mode 13 is contributing most significantly to the second and third peaks that you have there. So that's something that'll be in 6.1. And just finally, we're also extending the EDA, the energy decomposition analysis, which I think Yuji mentioned earlier in the workshop. This is being extended to decomposing the forces in an entirely analogous way. And so you can decompose the forces into contributions from various components: geometric distortion, electrostatics, van der Waals, polarization, and charge transfer. And this can give you some insight into what's actually going into molecular systems. Furthermore, you can have this breakdown in two different formats. So either atomic forces, and these can be useful for training force fields and the like. But more intuitive, a breakdown in terms of internal coordinates, which I guess what chemists are more used to thinking of. And so here we have an example of the water chloride cluster, and we can see that I guess there's significant contributions from all the components for the HCl bond shown there in dashed, but these almost entirely cancel out, and in fact that is a very low force, total force. And the most significant is the OH there, which has a lengthening effect, and that's because all of the contributions there are all pushing in the same direction there. All right, so I think that's it. So that's a couple of features that'll be coming up in 6.1 and a few features in 6.0, and hopefully there's something there for everybody. Thank you.